Don't mirror bad behavior. Instead, speak at a normal volume and pace so you can set the tone, which should persuade the other person to talk more softly as well so they can hear. Body language is a good way to show understanding. You might turn toward them, nod at some of the points they're making, maintain a neutral look on your face, or keep your posture open. Natural disasters come in many different forms. Of course, there are thunderstorms, blizzards, hurricanes, and even heat waves to consider. Then there are geological disasters like earthquakes or volcanoes to contend with. Get prepared by creating emergency supply kits and emergency remote work tools. A basic emergency supply kit will contain things like water, food, first aid and supplies, flashlights and batteries, a weather radio, and trash bags. The effects of toxic masculinity are harmful to women, racial and ethnic minority groups, those who identify as LGBTQ+, and men themselves. Toxic masculinity refers to cultural norms that are associated with excessively dominant behavior, misogyny, racism, and homophobia. Other harmful characteristics of toxic masculinity include extreme self-reliance and insecurity. Because of this, some men feel compelled to do everything alone, and the very idea of asking for support is emasculating. Toxic remarks are often insignificant, and it's easier to just ignore them. But excusing toxic behavior is exactly what allows it to grow and get out of hand, to the point of doing real harm. Know your company's policies and how it applies to your daily interactions with customers. If you practice repeating these policies out loud ahead of time, you'll be less nervous about explaining them to customers should the need arise. Be ready to emphasize to customers that your policies are in place to protect people and facilitate a fair business environment, and they apply to everyone who comes in. Consider taking steps for property protection during a natural disaster. This could include using sandbags around the perimeter of the building to minimize floodwater intrusion, or boarding up windows prior to a hurricane. Encourage employees to add weather alert apps to their cell phones, and make sure management stays up to date with any natural disaster warnings impacting your area. It's also important to note that during the recovery phase, 911 response times may be slower. Phone lines and cell phone towers may even be disrupted. Stay calm and do what you can. Let's start with some common questions about authenticity at work and walk through the answers. First, do you have to share your deepest secrets with your team to be vulnerable or authentic? The answer is no, absolutely not. At work, you need to be authentic as a professional. Leading with authenticity means communicating how you're doing honestly, communicating how you're feeling, being transparent about work progress and deadline pressures, and more. You're being authentic about your work sphere, not your personal life. Promoting honesty in the workplace speeds up communication and helps people to relax. Calm and focused people are more likely to try new things, get experimental, and generally try harder with their work. It's often a good idea to plan tasks and meetings around where people are. Some tasks, such as brainstorming sessions, lend themselves well to being in the office together, whereas more focused work, like structuring reports or data analysis, might be done better at home. You should also make key performance indicators, or KPIs, and weekly goals clear. This is especially true when you have team members working in different time zones or on different schedules. Because you're able to more readily view progress when it comes to an in-person employee, you may want to set up a different cadence for review of a remote or hybrid employee's work. Just be sure to communicate why check-ins are needed and what you're evaluating. Fast forward to today, and newspapers are going through a different kind of turmoil. While there are still many newspapers utilizing a combination of print and online subscription services, circulation is dropping rapidly. These days, of course, there's more than just radio when it comes to audio media. There's also the massive streaming media and podcast market. 89% of people globally listen to on-demand streaming media, much of which contains advertising. Practice what you're going to say aloud before the interview. That way, if you're unsure of how something sounds, you can perfect it before the interview. But again, don't memorize or write down everything you'll say. It's not a speech, it's a conversation. If the reporter asks a tough question that is irrelevant, inaccurate, or just too personal or inappropriate, it's well within your rights to attack the quality of the question. Whatever this survey shows you, don't shy away from the results. Look at them carefully, no matter how painful it might be. That means even if you get bad ratings yourself from your frontline workers, you need to be willing to accept that. Once you have a good grasp of what's going on, don't hide from it. Take ownership of the problems. Even if they're happening among frontline employees, who's in charge of them? Their managers. And who's in charge of them? Leadership. So no matter where you sit on the leadership rankings, you have a role to play. Own up to how you've done in the past and recommit to doing better in the future. A toxic workplace can be mentally and even physically draining. To survive in an environment like this, you have to protect your own mental and physical well-being. Ultimately, you may need to let certain people go. But if you must do this, communicate it to your workers so they understand why you're doing it and how it will lead to a better workplace for them.